Hey, everybody, welcome in. It is the Utopia Football Podcast. Great to be with you on a Thursday. We're recording this a couple days into franchise tag period. We're a few weeks away from free agency, and obviously a lot of things going on, a lot of balls in the air with the Texans, as this is probably the most exciting offseason that we've had in several years for the Houston Texans. And as we are doing with this format, by the way, I'm Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. weekdays. As you guys know, we've been tweaking things with the format over the last couple of weeks, doing solo mailbag on Tuesday. I think what we're going to do, at least for the time being, moving forward, is have awesome guests come on Thursday and talk about relevant topics. And this time of year, no better guest to have on. And by the way, first guest in the history of the Utopia Football Podcast in this format is my man Texans Cap joining me on the Utopia Football Podcast. All things free agency, all things salary cap. He is the man to go to, and you can see his Twitter handle right below him there. Cap, what's going on, man?
Oh, another wonderful day. Getting ready for the crazy busy season coming up in the next 4 or 5 weeks. It's going to be another busy season for Houston, as we know, and across the league. I think this is going to be a little more exciting of a free agency class than we had last year as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, I should say at Texans Cap, because I know some people are watching this and some people are listening to it. So at Texans Cap on Twitter /X is where you can find him. And also he's got all kinds of other places and ways you can find him: newsletters, emails, website, and so forth that we're gonna get to. Let's start there, Cap. I was thinking about that. Like this will be our fourth offseason we'll have gone through with Nick Caserio as the general manager. And obviously the first two, especially, I don't know that there's much at all we can learn from those first two because they were churning the roster and they were not an appealing place to land. Last year was a little bit different in that they were shopping, I think, in maybe pricier aisles, or at least better product they were going after in those aisles than they had the previous couple of years. Is there anything that we can draw from last year or Nick Caserio's history that can help us put a roadmap together for what this offseason is going to look like?
I don't know that we have quite enough data on Caserio and free agency because, like you said, the first 2 years you kind of just want to scrap those. So really, it's more like one good year of it. And so, what I'm more curious to see with this year is, does he stick with the short-term contract structure? Even if he makes a big splash signing, is it still going to be 1 and 2 year deals everywhere? And I get the mentality behind it, because you try to put pressure on the player to perform, because they're going to need another contract versus having a long-term deal. But I think it's just going to be a more exciting free agency. And I say that because, I mean, you saw Nick in Vegas during radio week. Everyone I've talked to that saw him there feels like he's just got a whole new persona about him this offseason. Like, he knows I've got Laramie Tunsil, CJ Stroud, and Will Anderson and Derek Stingley as my 4 foundational pieces at probably your top 4 positional value across your roster. And I think he just knows that. He's got the ammunition, and from all accounts that I'm hearing, he's just excited beyond what we've seen in past years.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it was very evident when he was sitting down with me and Seth. Like he's more at ease, if nothing else. He could tell. You're right. He knows he's got something here.
Yeah. So I think you kind of put all that together, given the cap situation, given the foundational pieces they have in place. This roster has a lot of need, but not like extreme need in certain areas. Any position on this roster could be upgraded beyond those 4 foundational pieces. So I think he's got a more wide berth roadmap of a free agency plan. He's gonna, I think, with D'Amico's stated concerns about defensive line, I think that's probably where they're gonna probably invest pretty heavily, whether it's free agency and or draft. But from a free agent standpoint, I wouldn't be shocked to see a big splash in that front 7, whether it's a defensive tackle or a linebacker. But I think just watching the structure is going to kind of be the biggest thing for me. Does he change and really start deviling into more long-term contracts, 3 and 4 year deals, or does he stick with that short-term structure that creates a little bit of pain year over year, but it also has its positive attributes to it as well?
How about, you mentioned defensively, and I expect him to make a splash on the defensive side too. And we're going to get into the franchise tag candidates and cap cut casualties on this podcast too, potential casualties for the cap and who they may bring back and so forth on this podcast with Texans Cap. But as far as the offensive side of the football, because we hear a lot of people wanting to, go big game hunting at wide receiver, big game hunting at running back. Is there anything that we can learn from looking at Nick Caserio, or is there anything that you feel like a direction in particular you feel like he's going to go in on the offensive side of the football as far as addressing needs?
I think for the sake of the discussion, let's assume that Schultz is back at tight
Mhm.
end. I sounds like it's trending in that direction, despite the contract void that had, happened on Monday. But let's say he's back in place. I really try not to bleed off of New England's history of not paying wide receivers except for one or two cases. So I don't know if that mentality is brought here, but I feel like it's going to be heavy defense and a more supplemental approach to the offensive side of the ball. I think wide receiver is definitely going to be something they're looking at in free agency. I just don't think it's going to be a top of the market guy. I'm not entirely sure Robert Woods is back. So I think having a good, younger wide receiver 3 type player is probably going to be on his radar. Running back, I can't get a feel for that. And I'm like literally 50-50 whether he goes out and makes a big splash at a running back. And I could always awfully easily see him just going back to the complementary role kind of thing, bringing back Singletary, maybe like a DeAndre Swift, and having running back by committee approach again. And we'll see what happens with Dameon Pierce, but I just don't get the feeling that they're going to go big free agent hunting at wide receiver. Running back I'm still kind of figuring out. Maybe we'll get a little more insight into it after the combine once he has some of his meetings with different agents.
Isn't it wild that like this time a year ago, Dameon Pierce was the face of the organization. I mean, and probably an indicator as to where they were as an organization at that point. No disrespect to Dameon Pierce, but that a second-year running back who got you 900 yards is the guy who's sort of at the tip of the spear of the triangle formation of players on the season ticket graphic, where you got guys standing in front and then 4 guys fanned out on each side. The guy in front is Dameon Pierce. I don't know that you'd get through 30 guys now before Dameon Pierce was standing on that graphic. Now, week 1, 2024, is Dameon Pierce a Houston Texan?
If he's able to continue in the kickoff return game, then I think there's a chance. But Houston's mentality, if you're not a starter and you're not one of the main frontline guys, you have to be a special teams contributor.
Yeah.
And Pierce has, beyond kickoff return, I don't recall him working too much on coverage teams on punt and kickoff. So unless he can step up his game in the return game or figure out a way to become a special team contributor, there may not be a spot on this roster for him. And I have hope that he can learn how to run in this scheme. It just, when you go back and you watch the tape, the footwork is, especially on the outside zone runs, he gets it. He gets that real happy shuffle feet kind of thing. You kind of lean back on Arian Foster. And I know it's a very difficult comparison. Trust me, I get it. But it's that decide one step, go upfield.
Yep.
And that's what you need in this kind of running scheme. And Pierce just hasn't figured that out yet. Maybe he figures it out this offseason and is able to do that. But until he can prove it, it's going to be tough for him to make this roster.
Yeah, he said to me and Clint Stoerner in the post-game show after that Cleveland game, because he was our guest. He was the only one that did it.
Yeah, it was a very honest interview there, too.
Yeah, you heard it. Yeah, I mean, he basically said they're not going to get the version of me that they want till next season, probably. Like he seems a little lost, like not. He's the happiest lost person you're ever going to meet. Like he's as friendly as they get, Southern gentleman, Southern friendly, country as hell. But it was a struggle for him this year, no doubt about that. All right, so let's kind of do this primer here then for the listeners to sort of where we're at, franchise tag, what could happen over the next couple weeks, cap casualties and so forth, because they've got to. What's the date that they've got to get under? Well, the Texans are under the cap, but is it the start of the league year where all these other teams have to get under the cap by? Cap?
Yeah, so the franchise tag opened yesterday, or no, I'm sorry, Tuesday.
Yep.
And it runs through March 5th. I don't foresee any franchise tag candidates for Houston. I think, Dalton Schultz would probably be the only potential one. I think that's a very low percentage given his market value compared to the tag value. And then from there, March 13th is when the new league year starts, and that's when all the teams have to be cap compliant. All their the active roster spending will be adjusted, And so we're just kind of waiting right now for the league to announce the official league cap number. We all kind of have an expectation of anywhere from 242 to 245. I know there was one report it could be high as 250, but I haven't heard that. But using those numbers, we're still waiting on an annual adjustment number. But Houston's gonna, heading into combine, heading into free agent spending, they're going to be sitting anywhere from 54 to $57 million in cap space to go towards re-signing their own players or outside players. And that, that's a good, strong position to be in, especially with a quarterback under a rookie contract like CJ Stroud. So the next few weeks, once we get past combine, it kind of sounds like Caserio's decided to push more of his agent discussions to the combine, to the week of the combine. So once we get past that, might get a little more insight of the direction for the team. But the legal tampering period, as funny as that is to say, starts on March 11th at midnight. So there'll be a 2-day period of a lot agreed to terms, nothing officially signed. So March 11th is when a lot of
breaking news, a lot of Schefter tweets those 2 days.
Oh yeah.
Right?
And you'd be shocked how many drafted tweets that him and Rappaport got locked and ready to go.
I'm sure.
Because we know these contracts are unofficially, illegally agreed to beforehand. So
you think like this week, that stands to reason. The combine, at least with the Texans' own free agents, obviously they can't do anything with other teams' free agents, but that might be a week where we see something pop with a Dalton Schultz or maybe one of the other guys that they're looking to retain next season because of the proximity factor. Everybody's in the same building in the same place. And it's not just evaluating college guys. Deals get done in Indianapolis too.
Yeah. Schultz's camp will have a good idea of what his market is looking like when they have some unofficial discussions around the Indianapolis stadium that week. And that's when they could come back and know that, hey, Houston's the best spot for me and can get an extension done before the league year starts. There's nothing preventing Houston from re-signing Sheldon Rankins, Dalton Schultz, or any of their scheduled free agents between now and March 13th.
I think so. What I heard you just say then, Texans cap, is that there's the legal tampering period from March 11th to the beginning of the league year. And then there's the double secret, super illegal tampering that goes on via back channels in Indianapolis where you are able to at least ascertain information.
There's a lot of napkin contract discussions going on in the
over some shrimp cocktails at St. Elmo's. Yeah. So you think Schultz is the only, and that makes sense to me, Schultz being the only potential franchise tag. We kicked around Grenard, but boy, that defensive end number is a big number. And I think people realize like there's no spreading that out. That hits the cap. This year, like that's a big nut. The multi-year deals allow you to spread things out over the course of a few years.
Yeah. And I think, the tag this year on defensive end is looking around 20.2 million. I think that's probably going to be the ceiling for his market value. So if Houston were to use the franchise tag on Grenard, I think that just resets the floor for a new contract extension because you have until July to get an extension done with your franchise tag candidates. So if the floor before was 16, 17, $18 million a year, and you applied the tag, which is 20 this year and 120% on top of that, so 23, so 46 over 2 years becomes the floor for a contract extension. So you just kind of hamper yourself with doing that. So that's the reason for me to think that Grenard's not really a franchise tag candidate.
Okay. Well, we'll get to some of the prominent guys as to whether you think they're going to stay or go. Texans free agents in just a second. But as far as cap casualties could go here over the next couple of weeks, is Robert Woods the most likely one in your mind to get cut? And if so, what's the ramifications for that for the Houston Texans?
Yeah, the team only has 54 players under contract at the moment. So there's not, and with an abundance of cap space, there's really not too many players that are going to fall in that cap casualty. But yeah, I think Robert Woods is going to be your first candidate. And he is scheduled to have a cap charge of $9.75 million this year. 4.75 of that's dead money that would stay on the cap on a release. So it's $5 million in cap savings there. And then about $6.5 million in cash. I think that's another piece that folks need to look at when they're looking at these cap casualties is the cash savings as well, because that's gives you more money to work with in free agency. Another one I've got a lower percentage personally on Jimmy Ward being a cap
Yeah.
casualty. The injury bug this year is a big concern, but he's really the captain of the back end of that roster, of that defensive side of the ball. And I think D'Amico really values what he brings to the team. And you just hope that you can get 14, 15 games out of him next year. But if the team were to go in a different direction at safety, you know, Jimmy Ward's at 7.7 cap this year with 3.7 in savings, with a good chunk of cash along with that, about 6 million. So those two would probably be my most prominent ones. If you were to
Yep.
get really down into the roster, maybe MJ Stewart, but there's really not a whole lot there. And at that point, you're just you got to think about replacement costs. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
saving like 1.75 million, then you got to pay somebody else to replace him. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I think the team likes him as a depth, and really like him on free agent, on special teams. So that would be about it. I mean, everybody else is on rookie deals or very, very low cost veteran deals. So
Yeah. I'm kind of excited to go dipping into other people's recyclables that they kick out to the driveway and go shopping there. That
there's
might
going to be a
be,
lot of
we're
that.
all looking at these free agency rankings, top 150 or whatever. There could be some nice juicy morsels out at the end of the driveway for these other 31 teams, right?
Yeah, I mean, you go and look at all the teams, all 32 teams, and you've got I think like 8 or 9 teams that are still projected to be non-cap compliant. And you look at teams like we'll take like the Los Angeles Chargers as an example. They've got 3 players that are accounting for, I think, upwards of about 40% of their salary cap. And on top of that, they're right now 35 million over the cap. So you got Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, and Keenan Allen. They're taking up 100 million in cap space between the three
so
of
you
them.
got that dynamic, and one of them's not even Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and you can add in Mike Williams, and there's 130 between 4 guys. And so LA is going to have to do something. And there's a new coach, new general manager. Something's going to change there. You know, that's when you start looking, does Khalil Mack get cut? You know, there is a big cap savings for him. And is that a type of player? Yes, he's 35 years old. Yes, he's still effective. But if the team lets John Grenard go, is that the kind of player that you could scoop up for a 1 or 2 year deal at a decent number, and he could probably be effective as a stopgap, and then you can still go draft a defensive end to develop behind him? You know, I think, like you said, there's going to be cap casualties across the league, and that's where you can really find some value in getting those players at 50 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, garage sale. I love it. I love that part of the garage sale part of the offseason for sure. All right, Texans Cap joining me here on the Utopia Football Podcast. All right, let's get to the Texans' own free agents before we get to the big names that you might be targeting or you think the Texans might be targeting outside of the organization. The most prominent. Let's start with the 2 that we've already talked about here. So let's rapid fire these, Cap, and you tell me what you think a deal looks like for these guys, because I know you do a lot of forecasting and kind of estimating and using comps and things like that to come up with numbers. You tell me what a deal looks like for these guys and whether or not you think they remain with the Houston Texans. Let's start right at the top with the guy who's going to get the biggest deal out of all of them, Jonathan Grenard.
Grenard, I think it's probably 50% he's back. It just depends on if his market develops out there. But I think Houston would be looking at somewhere in the $17 to $18 million per year range. But I do think there's a team or 2 out there that would be willing to pay him up on top of that, close to, if not above, $20 million a year. So I think Houston's going to set a hard line and say, this is our number. We're not going to go past it.
Yeah. And he's really high up a lot of these free agency rankings that you see from former personnel people and experts around the league. Like, he's widely viewed as a premier free agent. I think maybe more so than Texan fans thought he might be during the season. Is that fair to say, do you think?
Yeah. Edge just carries a premium with it. I mean, that's just the nature of the business. That that's where you get in between the market value and evaluation of the player. Yeah, his player evaluation may come in at 16 million, but Edge has that premium on top of it. So it's going to be more expensive.
All right. So I've got 5 more. So let's rapid fire these. Dalton Schultz. You sound optimistic that Dalton Schultz.
I think he's back in $9-10 million a year, probably 2 or 3 year deal. I think he's back.
Okay. Sheldon Rankins.
I think the injuries are a little bit of a concern, and I think they might go a little bit bigger name hunting at that position. So I would say he's gone.
Okay. Blake Cashman.
I think he's gone for sure.
Okay.
I think Houston is probably not going to be willing to match what other teams are willing to pay him.
So you think he busted out in a contract year and someone's going to pay Blake Cashman?
Yes.
Okay. Two more. Steven Nelson.
Man, the cornerback group in free agency is barren. So
as is the Texans depth chart if Steven Nelson
and
leaves.
so I think I would say it's like 50% that he's back. I think I could see an argument for both sides.
Yeah. What do you think? I don't know if you've done a post about Steven Nelson and his potential, what a deal looks like for him, but just kind of back of the cocktail napkin, what do you feel on Steven Nelson a good deal looks like for both sides?
Yeah, so he's getting a little bit. He's 30. I think he turns 31 this year.
Yeah,
he just turned 31 in January. Yeah. So I mean, that cliff's coming. He played through a lot of injuries this past year. So I mean, he played every single game, played through a lot. So I think it's fair. Probably just another 1-year deal with a little bit percentage on top of what he had last year, which was 5.5. He earned all his incentives, so he made 6.5 million. So if you can get him for 1 to 2 years at 7.5, I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm. Last one, Devin Singletary.
Man, like I said, if they go by a committee, I think there's a real chance he's back. We know the market at that position stays depressed. He was at 2.75 APY this year. So, and I think he clearly outplayed that contract. So I think it's fair to say that he's a $5 to $6 million guy. Just does he get that? And the market is going to be the tricky part.
Yeah. He was excellent for them this year. And yet I still feel like they might be able to bring him back on almost the same deal.
Probably so at the end of the day, just you do the incentive laden structure that Nick likes to do. And maybe you can get him back for just a little bump up, $3.5 million a year and run it back with him.
Am I missing anybody? That feels like kind of the big six right there, as far as like guys that are hitting free agency.
I would Kaimi Fairbairn and Cam Johnson.
Sure, they're
both
specialists. Duh. Yeah. What do you think happens with those guys?
I think Johnston's back.
Okay.
It just if the team is willing to go a little above what they paid him on this last 3-year deal, one of the only players to get a long-term contract. So I think there's a chance he's back. Kaimi Fairbairn, I get the impression that they might be ready for a reset at that position, unless his market just doesn't develop and in an open market, because he's such a good kicker. The injuries was a concern this year.
Yeah,
but he is so good. He 2 missed field goals this year, and
that's it.
And he is. I think he's just one of the most underrated special teams player in the league. Just doesn't have that big light on him, and that's by nature of playing in Houston.
Yeah,
but I think he's just a really good, and I would love to see him back. I'm just not entirely sure yet that he is back.
All right, we got a couple more minutes here before we cut you loose. So I want to make sure we get in on who the Texans might be, like some of the specific names. I think we outlined earlier in the podcast, like where you think kind of strategically how they could go about it by position, but the names, the names that have everybody kind of going right now. So let's start right at the top. And everybody's been talking about the possibility of Mike Evans, which to me feels like a real luxury item. If they were to sign Mike Evans, I'd be super stoked seeing that Schefter tweet get dropped. But I feel like that is an all-in type of move that a team does that's sort of at the end of their Super Bowl window, not one that somebody makes kind of when they're still in that foundational phase. They're a good team. They're going to be a playoff team, I think. But what are your thoughts on Evans?
Yeah, I'm with you there. It'd be a home run, but I just have a lot of concerns with a player that's 31. And yet I know 10 straight years or however many years straight of 1,000-yard seasons he had.
That's amazing.
But I just feel like that cliff's coming, and I don't want to be stuck with the bag as the Texans when that cliff comes for him. So if he is signed, that would be a pretty bold move by him, and I certainly wouldn't have any issues with it, but I don't see it happening at that position.
I'd rather see them do the Nnamdi Asomugha thing from 2011 that the Texans did by splitting up. Instead of signing Asomugha, the big fish, you go and get Jonathan Joseph and Daniel Manning, two really nice secondary fishes and Joseph wound up being a better football player than Nnamdi Asomugha.
Oh man, talk about the
but
best.
if you could do like a Tyler Boyd and some other receiver, Gabe Davis and Tyler Boyd for a combo of 18 million as opposed to Mike Evans for 22 or whatever it would be.
Yeah, I think the team
And
might be if Woods is out, then you're going to definitely need that dirty underneath, willing to block, willing to do the dirty work underneath wide receiver, and that's probably a Tyler Boyd type player, not a slot wide receiver build because Tyler Boyd's 6'1", 197, but that's the kind of player. And then if you want a little game changer, maybe like a Curtis Samuel type, Gabe Davis, I'm not entirely sure on, but definitely another speedy player that's got speed and size to complement Collins and Tank Dell, I think would be an interesting addition at the wide receiver spot.
How about running back? Do you have a particular pecking order? Well, one, do you think they sign one of these marquee with air quotes? I know they're, veteran players who've done some things. Barkley, Jacobs, Henry, I'll throw Eckler in there as well. Do you have a pecking order there? Or do you have one you think that the Texans might prefer? What are your thoughts on the running back position?
I think they're probably more like the complementary type role. So maybe if you could get a Tony Pollard on a lower cost deal than compared to like Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs, then pairing him with Singletary or maybe DeAndre Swift kind of type player and pairing him with Singletary, I think that's probably more the path that they look at. I would put a heavy percentage of something like that happen than a big running back contract like a Barkley or Josh Jacobs.
Okay. So last thing, flipping over to the defensive side, because I think you and I are of like mind. We expect there's a splash and a splurge. It's going to come over on that side of the ball. And I think D'Amico kind of foreshadowed that with some of his comments in the offseason where we built through the defensive line. If we were let's say we had a pool and we put a bunch of names of linebackers and defensive linemen into a bowl, right? Free agents into a bowl. And we're all picking out, there's 20 of us here and we're each picking out a name. Which name, and you win the pot if the Texans sign this guy.
Okay.
Which name would you be most excited to pull out of the bowl? You pull out of that bowl, go, oh, I feel good about winning this.
Well, we'll take Chris Jones out of the equation. I don't think he's getting away from
I'll
KC.
put his name in there, but I would be pissed if I got his name because I don't think he's coming here. I'll put it in there.
Yeah. But I mean, I think you look at names like Grover Stewart, DJ Reader, Christian Wilkins out of Miami, Javon Kinlaw out of San Francisco. There's Danico Autry up out of Tennessee. I think are all very valid defensive tackle candidates for this team. Justin Matabuke out of Baltimore. Those are the type players that I think the team's probably looking at maybe making a splash.
Yeah.
And same with that front seven. I think linebackers an area that this team will probably take a look at. And I did an article on positional value, and a lot of teams found a lot of value at linebacker in 2023, and that same group is coming back on the market again. And I think somebody like Aziz Shahir out of Tennessee is a type of player that you could get at a decent contract to sit in and play Mike or play next to Christian Harris. So I think linebacker at a moderate kind of deal, and maybe a splash at defensive tackle might be the approach on the front seven.
You got to tell me. You got to give me one name, man. Which name do you want to pull out of the bowl?
I'm sorry. I didn't answer the question.
That's all right. No, I like the overview. We needed the overview of the position. I just want you, like, which name would you go, okay, I feel like I got a good shot. I think they're going after this guy. I think I got it.
I'll take Christian Wilkins out of Miami.
I love that one. Okay, good. And he's been talked about as a franchise tag candidate, but they're $50 trillion over the cap. Yeah.
They have a lot of restructure capability, but yeah, and they changed defensive schemes. They were with Fangio last year, and now they're going to a completely different system. So we'll have to see if Miami even sees Wilkins as a fit in the new scheme there. So, and I think he would be a fantastic, 3-technique defensive tackle in D'Amico's scheme of just going straight upfield, get straight to the quarterback.
Yeah, next to Will. Oh, that'd be fun. That'd be a whole lot of fun. Texans Cap at Texans Cap on Twitter. Cap, tell the audience all the other places they can find you, all the good stuff you've got going on, because you are a must follow this time of year.
Yeah, so I do have a free newsletter that I send out usually about once a week. It's capandtrade.football is the website for that. It's a free subscription. You sign up for that, and then I'll be doing a lot of data entry at overthecap.com for league-wide salary cap needs. And I keep a lot of the teams there, but during the off season, I'm covering league-wide over there. So those are the two places on top of X, which is at Texans Cap. So make sure you subscribe if you're interested in the newsletter.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's this time of year. It's a must-have if you really want to be ready to go for free agency. This is the time of year to be all dialed in on what's going on with the Texans salary cap. Cap, I appreciate it, man. You're the best.
No problem, Sean. I appreciate having me.
All right, there it is, the great Texans Cap, at Texans Cap on Twitter. Of course, a reminder here, subscribe, rate, review this podcast. We appreciate you clicking that subscribe button if you haven't already. You get the podcast sent automatically to wherever it is you listen to it each and every week. 2 episodes a week in the off season. We have a mailbag episode coming up on Tuesday, HOU mailbag at gmail.com, HOU mailbag at gmail.com. Send me any of your emails on the Texans, the NFL, or otherwise at HOU mailbag at gmail.com. So for Texans Cap, our guest today, and for our producer, Anthony Irwin, big thanks to Anthony, who does a great job getting the podcast out to all of you. I am Sean Pendergast. We are out of time. We will see you on Tuesday. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody.